Hey, it's Matthew Cudmore, Story Behind the Stone, a show where we talk service, sacrifice, and story, connecting you to the people changing the way the world remembers and veterans' causes in commemoration. Today, we're headed down under to Australia's capital city, Canberra, home of the Australian War Memorial, a national memorial museum and archive dedicated to commemorating Australians who've died in war. Over 1 million visitors per year walk the courtyard and Hall of Memory at the memorial, paying respects to the over 100,000 Australians who served and died in war. This is more than a museum. It's where a nation remembers serving Australians, including conflicts before the First World War, to Gallipoli, to the trenches of the Western Front, to World War II in the Pacific and Europe, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and peacekeeping missions around the world. Joining us today is Terri-Anne Simmonds, head of the digital experience at the memorial, who helps lead the memorial's digital transformation and digital projects, ensuring new generations can connect with the personal stories behind the names. We'll explore how the memorial is helping Australians and the world remember, interpret, and understand the lasting impact of war. Terri-Anne, it was such a pleasure chatting with you today. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in.
Welcome to Story Behind the Stone, where we talk service, sacrifice, and stories, connecting you to the past and the most interesting people in the field of veteran causes and commemoration. My name is Ryan Mullens, along with Matthew Cudmore, and we are with Memory Anchor, a company committed to using technology for good as we change the way the world remembers. Today, we're joined by Terri-Anne Simmonds, head of digital experience at the Australian War Memorial. Terri-Anne, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Terri, it's so wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you for joining. I would like to just give a little bit of context to our listeners about the Australian War Memorial. Where is it sited and what does it mean to the people of Australia?
The Australian War Memorial is in Canberra, which is Australia's national capital. So it's about 3 hours south of Sydney. So listeners are probably familiar with Sydney. So it's just inland a little. It's not on the coast, but it is where our Australian Parliament is. And it is on none of the war land of our First Nations people. The Australian War Memorial is the heart of commemoration for Australians. So it is the place that people come to remember, reflect, and to learn about our service and our military history.
We were chatting a little bit before we started recording just on how actually significant this site is. And for people who haven't seen it before, and I haven't been there personally, I keep spying on it from satellite view because it's under some really phenomenal construction projects that you're going on. But can you just tell us first, before we get into the construction, but what specific, like, it is a special site. It's more than just a memorial, isn't it?
That's right. It's the Australian War Memorial. We have legislation that says our role is for to help Australians actually understand the meaning of war and the impacts of war. And so what that means is we're actually a museum. We're also a memorial, which is incredibly important. And we are also an archive. So we're custodians of an enormous amount of our past, our Australian past. And so it's a really, it's like multifaceted. And our physical location it's incredible. It is a really beautiful place to visit, and it's always been the case. And it's just a really striking place. And as you mentioned, we're in the middle of a huge construction project because we actually did run out of space. The building is about 80 years old, and so as you can imagine, unfortunately, because conflicts have continued, we've had to expand our footprint, and so it's an incredible place, and you really have to see it to really understand it. But it is a beautiful place.
Australia, we think of it Gallipoli to Afghanistan. How do Australians today look at Australia's participation in different conflicts?
We are the country of one of the world's oldest living cultures, but for a long time we've thought of ourselves as a very young country. with federations, particularly around the First World War and even the Second World War, we weren't a huge population, and so the impacts those wars had on our culture was enormous. And the fact that so many small towns around the country. So Australia's got the big capital cities, but we're made up of so many small regional country towns, and often the impacts of people to go, and particularly sons going to serve in those earlier, the First World War in particular, that would have a massive impact on that community. And so I think people have always resonated with that. And then certainly even with the Second World War. So my grandfather served in the Second World War, and I didn't actually get to meet him. He didn't die in the war, but I didn't get he passed before I was born. And not having that connection with him, but knowing that he served, I've been able to look at his service records. I've been able to find photos of him in our national collection. So it just has that it's a personal thing. It's incredibly personal to people in Australia. And then as we move on, I think into more contemporary times, I know a lot of our current serving military people do bring their families here as well to say, look, this is what we do. And that's a part of the really important part of just, I guess, in terms of Afghanistan, being able to tell the story, because it's such a long, drawn out conflict. I think we need to provide context for people, and yeah, I think that's a really, really hard question. That could be a whole podcast, but yeah, I think it's really it's just an incredibly important part, and it means so much to people. The Australian War Memorial in particular, quite a few years ago, I was driving around for work, and we have this vehicle that had our branding on it, and I was staying at just a small little drive-in kind of hotel motel thing, and there were these young kids in the like just across in a room across, and they were like, "Oh, do you work for the Australian War Memorial?" And I was like, "Yes," and they were so thrilled. Like I felt like a rock star, because their parents were currently serving, and they were kind of in between postings, and so it was something that it just means so much to people, and that's the privilege of working here as well.
I'd love to turn the lens towards you. How did you get involved, and how did you get your interest? Your grandfather, I'm guessing, had something to do with it.
I think for me, it was actually the architecture of the building is something that really actually drew me, because it's a really solemn place. So that iconic dome that you see arrive from your Google Earth, so that's our Hall of Memory, and in the Hall of Memory is the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. So because we know so many people didn't get to come home, and so that soldier represents all soldiers. Yep, that's the one, that dome there. So um, that architecture, particularly, so if you're coming from Anzac Parade, which is the main drive, you've got the view of that dome, and it just actually that really always resonated with me. But I guess how I actually started with the Australian War Memorial was for a project called Places of Pride, which is our National Register of Memorials. So I started it, and I've got a digital background, and I love all things digital. And what I love about digital is it is a communication tool, and so it's where I feel really lucky is I love telling stories, as you guys do as well, and then you take technology and digital advances to tell those stories in creative and new ways. And so I started with that project, which was the idea is to capture every memorial across the country, which again, that comes back to that First World War. So memorials were being erected before the end of the First World War, because when there was news that people had been lost, there was nowhere to mourn. There was no, bodies that, there were no graves that could be visited, and so memorials were erected across the country, and every Anzac Day, that's where local communities come together to commemorate. And so we wanted to actually capture that with the view of showcasing that in our new main entrance of the Australian War Memorial. So that's how I got here. And then I was able to, went away for a little while, and then I was able to come back as the head of digital, which has, just been an absolute dream.
And you have thousands of memorials logged in places of pride.
Yeah.
How can people access that, and what are you most proud of with that project?
Oh, Matthew, you have the best questions.
I don't know if they're all fair, but they are questions.
They're hard, but because they're so good. How can people get involved? Yes, people go to the website, they create an account to upload their photos. And so I think that's the really interesting thing, that even if a memorial has already been recorded, we're really encouraging people to add their own photos, because we can tell more of a story. What am I most proud of with that particular project? I think that there's the bits about the project that are great, but what I've loved about it is actually connecting with people across the country. So, and actually really getting an insight into how people commemorate and what it means to them, and as a part of the opening of the new main entrance, which has opened. It opened in December last year. We've got a large digital display, which is a cinematic film showcasing the commemoration across the country. So we're getting close to 13,000 memorials that are recorded on places of pride. So obviously we couldn't, in a film sense, capture all of those. So we really made sure that we showed the small, the grand, quiet commemoration, contemporary commemoration. And so that film actually is something that it's 20 minutes, and it doesn't have any sound. And I thought, oh, how's that going to engage people? And while I'm slightly biased, I've watched it so many times and I just absolutely love it. It's really beautiful. And with that project, so what I was able to do, so a beautiful spot in Queensland, Currumbin. It's near the Gold Coast. You might have heard of the Gold Coast, service paradise kind of area. Their dawn service, they do a burial at sea, which is incredibly moving. So they take out these boats, and every year veterans that have passed, if their families choose to, they had the ashes of those veterans. And so it's like a continuation of commemoration, but in a contemporary sense. And it's just incredibly moving. So yeah, I think that project in its every part of it has been just such an honor to work on.
I can hear the passion and conviction about this project. I want to pause for a second to provide, again, because I'm the context guy. I heard of two concepts that I have heard about and I have seen in photographs and on the internet and everything. Anzac Day and the dawn service. I think these are so special and so specific to Australia and New Zealand as well.
The 25th of April is where we come together to commemorate the Gallipoli landings. But it also is a moment in time for Australia to stop and reflect, but also thank our current and former service people. I think that's really a part of it. It's a time to just pause, and we don't do that a lot in modern society, but it begins. So the Anzac Day, it's probably slightly different in each community, but essentially at dawn or pre-dawn, we come together. There's the ode is read, so we read the ode. There's also the last post is sounded, so that quite famous bugle battle call, and we all just pause and reflect together as a community, and it really is really moving because it's in that quiet of the morning is actually a really wonderful time to reflect. Try and imagine the the I guess the fear that people had when they're about to go into battle. Um, and it's a time where we just hear some stories about people's experiences. But yeah, the ceremony itself is incredibly moving. In Canberra, so at the Australian War Memorial, we begin with the didgeridoo. So that's really, and you can imagine, you can hear a pin drop and then the didgeridoo comes. And then with that bugle is just really, really something special. It's hard actually to put into words how incredibly moving it is.
You've been in this role for a while. Is there any story in particular that really touches you that you've come across?
One of the stories last year, actually, we launched Transcribe, which is our new transcription website where people can come and look really up close online at digitized records. And one of the stories that is really heartbreaking, but also has a happy ending, which is, sometimes not the case. But in the Second World War, flying officer Ronald Tanner, he, letters were such a big part of how people communicated to back home, and that's why transcription is so incredible. So he had written a letter just in terms of in the event of his death, which I can't imagine having to write that letter and knowing that it could be a real possibility. And he wrote this letter. He was late returning from an operation, and so it was thought that he had died in operation. Um, the letter was sent to his wife back home, and they had a young son, a 4-year-old son. And we at the Australian War Memorial have that letter. So it's been donated by the family, and we've been able to transcribe it and read his words of like saying goodbye. And fortunately, he was fine. He was absolutely fine. That's the plot twist that you absolutely want to hear. But that letter was sent to her. She received it. And so there was a moment in time where her world just completely collapsed. But luckily news was passed on that actually that wasn't correct. But yeah, just that what I love about our transcription project is that you get to hear that first person account from over 100 years ago now. And if you can't read that beautiful cursive writing, the transcription does it for you. So I have to admit, I usually just look at the letter really quickly and go, yep, that's beautiful, can't read it. And then I'll read the transcription. And yeah, that's actually just incredible. It's a real window into our past. The other thing that's far more, I guess, contemporary and not any less real. So, and I think that's the thing. When we're talking about these people, these people 100 years ago were just like you and I, but without smartphones, essentially. Um, but it does really hit home what it means to people in modern day. I had a veteran, an Afghanistan veteran, come to Canberra. We've been working together on that film project that I talked about in the main entrance. And he hadn't been to the memorial for a few years. And so he and I walked around, and in our commemorative area, so it's a very solemn area. So, and it has on the walls the Roll of Honour of the over 103,000 servicemen and women that have died in service or in service-like operations, and 103,000 in the context of Australia with a small population is just absolutely heartbreaking. But I was able to take him to his unit, and he saw for the first time the name of someone he had served with that was lost. And for him, that was incredibly hard. But I think he would say it was important. And it's about, paying respect to that person. And it's, I don't want to liken it to when we lose people in our life, we all need something. And that, I think when you work with someone and in a combat sense, it's a different relationship. It is, I guess, like family bonds. And when you lose someone, it's just so complicated. And I think that's what we know. We work with people and it's so complicated. So, yeah, being able to bear witness to that is incredibly special.
Thank you for sharing that. And that, and as you're talking, a couple things are kind of coming to my mind is just, again, that importance of those spaces of remembrance, not just for families, but for serving members too. And I think that just really shows the importance of that story. And, your expansion of the memorial itself is you were saying it's done to create space for these new conflicts, which is amazing because I personally believe that a lot of the soldiers who have returned, they carry a lot of psychological wounds as well. And part of that trauma is just witnessing that pain and witnessing that grief. And, I, again, your memorial itself is a reason to hop on a plane from Canada and go down and check it out. I'm very curious. Yeah, I will. I'm curious is, what is some of these expansions going to look like? How are you planning on commemorating some of these modern conflicts? Because we often think of these old conflicts from 100 years ago, 80 years ago.
Australia's been involved in many peacekeeping operations. So we're the custodians of our military history. And that means that we're custodians of some really large, we call them large technology objects. I don't know. I wish there was, basically it's, the vehicles and the boats and I'll get in trouble for calling them boats. But all the different large things, helicopters, things like that. So we do want to be able to show people those as well, because particularly in the modern day conflicts, people could say that's what I served on, or that's where I was in that the Bushmaster, Debbie the Bushmaster, so it's kind of modern day tank type thing. I'll get that wrong as well. That people seeing that makes it real for them as well. They get to see the size and the scale. So obviously to house that, you need a bigger footprint as well. And then, but it is just being able to tell the Afghanistan stories, but also contextualize it. So part of being a museum is that you need to provide the context for people. So it's not just, here's this amazing, impressive plane. It's where did that fit into the story? Why was there a conflict? And we do have, so I think actually today is in Australia anyway. Today is the International Day of the peacekeeping rather. And so we have a vehicle that was driven by Ian Ward, and that was hit by an IUD. He was on a peacekeeping mission, and that vehicle in its form, where it's essentially, obviously been hit by something, that's going to be showcased in our new development as well. So it just really, I think it's a way of people understanding the risks that people have put they've put themselves on the line, but also, and what is that damage? What does that because these are places that are far away from Australia. So, you need to be able to have a place where people can understand to some extent the scale and the seriousness.
When we look at Australians, Canadians, the majority of our casualties happen as a result of IEDs. And so, that object in and of itself, I've never seen anything like that. And again, to see the damage that are caused by these IEDs and what those individuals were facing. I have a few friends who came back, and it was difficult to drive on certain roads because of just the amount of experiences they had of these IEDs going off. And so to capture that and be able to share that experience, and I love how you said that it is context, and my question to you is, we've talked about the physical space, but I'm kind of curious on what your take is on digital technology and the future of commemoration. What is your view on how technology can help that commemoration into the future?
I love that question because obviously that's what I love. And I actually love some of the work that you guys have done, and I'm really keen to dig into it because, digital provides opportunity, opportunity to reach new people, talk to you. One of the things we talk about internally a fair bit is reaching new audiences and younger audiences. So because it's an important part. Like we exist for a reason, and you don't have to support war to visit the Israel Memorial. It's not about supporting war. It's about understanding it and appreciating and respecting the people that have served. So in terms of digital, it's so exciting. One of the things that we're doing this year actually is we're about to embark on a complete new website development project. So we'll have a brand new website. What that means and why that relates to your question, Ryan, is we've been thinking about, well, with AI, with new technology, what can we do to get people the accurate information that they need? Or that they're looking for, or what can they discover that they couldn't discover before? And so that's really, really exciting. And just to give some context, so we currently every year to our website get about 3 million visitors. And so we've already got high traffic, but what we want to do is make it a high quality experience for everyone, and we've got some ways to go there. The other thing to say, on our website we make available wherever we can objects, items from our national collection. So it's a way, so even though we're expanding our physical footprint, we still can only display, it's a really small percentage of the what we hold. And I don't know the exact figure, but I'm going to say like it's 10% of the national collection is what is actually viewed. So digital allows us to actually show those objects. And with 3D technology, we can, things that are fragile, they can be displayed. So some of the basics and the fundamentals of digital are just the bits that really add value um, to people's experience and learning. And then you start to look at really like how are we communicating with people. So it's a bit of a question mark about, and I'd love to talk to you guys again once we're a bit further on that website journey, because I really think, AI could have a really important role when managed really well and safely, but to just dive deep into a specific question or time. And I think I mentioned to you guys before about my grandfather serving in the Second World War. I had met him. He didn't die in service. In fact, the fact that we hold those records and the National Archives actually have his service records. And so I was able to see his service record, and he was a bit naughty and he got fined for a bit of drunk and disorderly behaviour here and there, and so but he was a rat of Tobruk, and that's a really important story in the Australian context as well. And not having ever met him because he passed before I was born, I was able to find a photo of him with where he was serving, and that's incredibly precious and special. So what I want to do is make sure that our digital tools get other people, other Australians being able to find their connection, but really quickly and easily. We don't want them to have to be a librarian or a technical wizard, or it should just be a few intuitive steps. So it's actually kind of the basics. Sometimes getting the basics right is a really important part of the piece.
Terri-Anne, would you be comfortable actually sharing that image? Do you have it?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. Naughty. He looks naughty in the photo.
How would he feel about the work that you're doing today?
Oh dear. Oh, you've kind of choked me up there a bit. I think he would be incredibly proud, I think, which is really lovely. And I have to say, I think my parents are as well. I think they're really proud of that work, but it is a privilege, and I know I'm really lucky. So I'm a public servant. So we're Australian public servant. We get to really engage with members of the public and see them and talk to them, and even just that incidental. So I could be walking into our administration building, and there could be a visitor that's going to the memorial, and they might be lost or they might have a question. I get to talk to them and just see what it means to them. So I don't know. I hope he would be proud.
I think he would be.
He might not be proud of me saying that he got in trouble for drinking.
You know what?
Yeah.
I think he would. I know a lot of soldiers that kind of wore their stories. Some of the ones they enjoyed sharing wasn't so much the war stories as it was the time they got in trouble for doing this or that.
Yeah, that's right.
So
exactly. You
I
gotta
think
have
he's having a good chuckle with you.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah.
Terri-Anne, I wanted to talk just a little bit about the future. We have a lot to look forward to. 2025 was a big year with Anzac 110. You have a lot going on with the physical space at the AWM, with the ongoing works and construction. What do people have to look forward to in the next 12 to 24 months at the AWM?
Yeah, it's a really exciting time. And Ryan showed us on Google Earth, and it was really great to see the evolution. So we've been a part of this development project. So it's actually a project of 8 years, as you would imagine, with a massive construction. And so it's a really large increase to our physical footprint. And the exciting bit is we're almost done. So the new Anzac Hall, which has that rising sun motif over the top of it, which is representative of the Australian Army. That is going to open in 2026. And what I would do, so to all your international listeners, and hello to all the Canadians, Australians love Canadians, by the way, we would love for you to start planning your trip to Australia and to see our new expanded building and the galleries and the stories that we tell. So I would really recommend people start to look at April 2027 for a visit to Australia, because they can come to Anzac Day. And it's not too cold yet. Not that, in the scheme of things, it won't, probably doesn't compare, but it's a beautiful autumn period. So this year was actually quite warm still. Sometimes it's a little cold when you get up really early for the dawn service. But yeah, it's an incredible time where people will be able to see all the hard work that's gone on. And I see every day the team internally. So I guess behind the stone and the people I work with. So I work with incredible people. So conservators, historians, our curators, they've been working incredibly hard to really honour these stories. And 2026, 2027, people get to see that hard work. So I really encourage people to start planning and come on down.
I wrote it down, April 2027. And trust me, your cold weather's our hot weather, so there's no concern there. I was in Sydney years ago. I remember it was in the middle of your winter, and I had shorts and a t-shirt on, and there's two ladies literally came by with parkas on, and we both stared at each other for a second, thinking each other were crazy. So
Oh, that's great. I have to
Yeah.
say though, Sydney is just like so show-offy in its fabulous like weather, and just Canberra is the bush capital, so you get a different experience. So we're actually surrounded by mountains, so we do get quite cold, and it's but I think the other great thing that's a bit unusual, we have the amazing, beautiful Mount Ainslie right behind the memorial. And actually you can walk, there's a trail up, and it's called the Kokoda Trail, like it's a representation of the Kokoda Trail. And but because we're surrounded by bushland, what has happened at times is if I've left work, say a little later, it's kind of gotten dark, I will be greeted by kangaroos coming down from the hill.
Okay, well, see, now you're selling me even more.
Fantastic. It's a great hike. It's really beautiful, but you want to avoid the roos if you can.
That's a deal. Well, Terri-Anne, thank you so much for joining us today. For our guests that have tuned in, if they want to learn more information, where do they go?
They can go to awm.gov.au. That's our main website, and from there they should be able to find any path they want to go down. If they wanted to look at that particular letter that I was talking about, from Flying Officer Tanner to his wife, they can go to transcribe.awm.gov.au. And from there they can start to look around. The other thing that listeners might be interested in, we've just launched recently a new website that's highly curated stories and really well-researched articles by historians internally and internationally. So wm.awm.gov.au, that's our new digital code format to tell more in-depth stories. We've got a mix of videos and things like that, so love for people to go and visit that as well. I mentioned earlier about Ian Ward, that vehicle. There's a video on with interviewing Ian Ward's sister was interviewed, and you can see that vehicle as well. So wm.awm.gov.au is a good place to visit as well.
Terri-Anne, thank you so much. And again, to our listeners, if you haven't had a chance to check out the website, what they have done over there at the Australian War Memorial is absolutely amazing. It is something to look at. I think you're, in my mind, from what I've seen, you're one of the leaders in the world.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Matthew. And I have to say, what you guys are doing is incredible. It's so fascinating. It's actually really inspiring. And that's what I love about, seeing other work. The kind of digital work that you guys are doing just makes me want to be better as well. And you're doing it from such a place of genuine authenticity that can't be bought, can't be replaced. So yeah, thank you for having me. I really love talking to both of you.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Story Behind the Stone is available on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on the Reach Across America radio network, on iHeartRadio, Audacity, and TuneIn. Just search for Wreath. We air every Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern on the Reach Across Radio Network. Thank you for tuning in.